while you're with us today, please feel free to check out our website and see some extracurricular fun activities that you can be a part of. And also, if you feel like it, throw some photos of your current or most recent visits to our aquarium with the hashtag #IMissMyAquarium. We'd really like to see what you enjoyed most visiting us. Now joining me today is Kathy, and she's another one of our aquarists. And like I said, we're going to break down an invasive species for you, and that's the tank that we're showing you guys today. So Kathy, let's get into what these fish are behind us and what an actual invasive species is. So an invasive species, like the ones you see here, is an organism that is found in an environment that it's not naturally originating from. So these fish that you're looking at, that's a common rudd with that red tail. They're normally from Eurasia and found into Asia itself as well. Now over to the right, we have a smaller fish that's a round goby, the one propped up on the gravel. Those guys are also native to Central Eurasia, even the Black Sea and the Caspian Seas too. Also what we have in here on all of these pillars are zebra mussels. Now these guys are fake, because if we had actual zebra mussels, we wouldn't have anything but zebra mussels. So those are also an invasive species that we wanted to exhibit. So we have those three invasives in this tank for you. Now, invasive species sounds like a bad word, but that's not always the case. What do I mean when I say they're not always bad?
So, you said an invasive species is just an animal that exists somewhere that's not naturally found. Now there's also such thing as introduced species. So for example, in our Great Lakes, we actually have salmon introduced to help with sport fishing. But when it becomes invasive is when it has negative impacts. So an invasive species can have negative impacts on our environment, on our human economy, and also on human health directly. So in an ecosystem, it's a delicate balance. You've had a predator and a prey, and they've kind of lived together for a long time, so that balance and relationship is established. You have an invasive species that comes in, there's no natural predator, so there's nothing to keep it under control, and because of that, it can kind of populate out of control, it can compete with native species for resources, for food, and then for the human economy, it actually can damage. For zebra mussels, for example, as Liz said here, they can go out of control. So they can clog up pipes, lampreys in our Great Lakes. They actually damage our fisheries. What are some other ways that they can damage the environment, Liz?
Yeah, definitely. Let's go back to zebra mussels. That's a big factor in our Great Lakes right now. Zebra mussels not only clog up pipes, but they can affect human health kind of in a domino effect. So your zebra mussels will, live on whatever surface they want. They'll ingest all of those toxins from the water that we unfortunately put in, so PCBs or any type of pollution. Then some animal will come along and have a meal on that zebra mussel, and then that animal that ate the zebra mussel, we as humans may actually end up catching and eating ourselves. So in that domino, that chain effect, we'll end up ingesting those toxins that the zebra mussels ingested. And that could be for any fish. It could be for the rudd or the round goby. So a lot of them can impact our health in the long run, really.
We're talking about, fish, all these examples that we've been giving are primarily fish, but an invasive species can be anything.
Right.
For example, there are beavers in an archipelago of South America, and those beavers were invasive to that area, and they just completely destroyed the forest there because they just eat. So an invasive species can be an animal, it can be a plant, it could be an animal in the water, it can be an animal on land, it can be an insect, anything really. So Liz, how exactly do all these invasive species get here?
Right, that's a great question. So invasive species, like she said, they're not normally found here. So where did these guys come from and how did they get here? So invasive species can come probably in three ways. We'll break it down for you. So one of those ways is just by accident. People just don't know that they have some part of an invasive species on their boat. Let's say, for instance, you have a lot of boaters that travel in between different lakes and rivers, sometimes even countries, crossing over thousands and thousands of miles, and those little hitchhikers can get onto the the hull of a boat, or even sucked up into the ballast of the boat, and then unknowingly, when ships or boaters release or discharge that ballast water into the lakes, they're also discharging those invasive species. Now, it doesn't have to be just a fish itself. It could be like the larvae of a fish, or like, just fish eggs, any part of that invasive species. Now, that was accidental. We can also get into intentionally introducing invasive species. So, believe it or not, there are some instances where you can release animals to control other pests. So, here's an example. In Hawaii, they had an overabundance of sugarcane rats, and they wanted to control those sugarcane rats with an animal called a mongoose. Well, the mongoose eventually got bored of eating sugarcane rats, and then it became an invasive species. So now there's no natural predators in Hawaii to take over those mongoose. So now they have an overpopulation of mongoose, and we got to figure out how to control that now. And then the third way is probably just a mix of the two. It's unintentional and, it's intentional. So here's a great example. Say you have this goldfish for a really long time, but you don't want the goldfish anymore. You either flush it down the drain or you give it to another pet store, and that pet store can release it into the wild accidentally. So there's always that way of you don't want an animal anymore, so you kind of just let it go, but that's not the right thing to do, A, for the animal or for the environment. So those three ways are probably the main ways you can introduce your invasive species into a non-native area.
Yeah, and when you were talking about with the goldfish, a lot of people don't realize that goldfish are actually very, very invasive in our waters here in the Great Lakes.
Yep.
There's over 50 million individual goldfish that we found in our Great Lakes.
What's really cool, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Go ahead.
how we got these fish specifically right here. So a couple years ago is when we set this exhibit up for you guys. And the way we got these animals was we just went out to the Great Lakes. On one of our days, we went out and set some traps for the round gobies down by the Niagara Falls Gorge. And within 2 hours, I think my coworker and I had got 9 of them in one basket. That's how we got the round gobies. And then the common rudd, the DEC actually got for us just on one of their trips throughout their lakes, their patrols. And they got them so readily that it was just like another thing being caught out of the water. Now, the DEC told us that day that they catch more goldfish than any other fish in that lake, unfortunately. And it's mainly because people are just releasing the goldfish. After you go to a county fair or some festival, a lot of people sell fish there for you. And it's just something we should kind of not want to do, or keep the fish for its entire lifespan so you don't introduce it, unknowingly.
And in addition, again, to our Great Lakes animals, so for zebra mussels alone, in terms of negative impacts, the economical impact of zebra mussels, the cost to remove them in the Great Lakes alone is like $50 million per year just to remove zebra mussels. So they can become a real problem, a real strain in multiple ways. Now, all of this sounds very negative, but there are lots of things that we can do to help. The main way that we can help is by education. So that's great, that's what we're doing now. Learn what an invasive species is. Learn your local invasive species in your area so you can kind of be aware of them and notice when you see them. The second thing is to clean up after yourself, and not just clean after yourself in terms of litter. If you have a boat and you're going out, rinse that gear off. Rinse off your fishing line, your fishing rod, rinse off the hull of your boat. Make sure you don't have any hitchhikers.
Now, that could also be for hiking outside, right? What about like your pets and stuff?
Exactly, because we said invasive species can really be anything, insects, anything terrestrial or on land. So your hiking boots or even your dog's paws, like those little things, they can get in. We're not talking anything crazy. Just rinse it off with a hose to make sure you don't have any hitchhikers. Another thing that you can do is just be aware of your local laws and regulations. So a lot of states will have an opportunity where if you see an invasive species, you can go and report it. They have a list of things that you can and can't do. A lot of areas have restrictions on the exotic pet trade. So make sure you're well informed before you even acquire a pet, that you're allowed to have it there, that it doesn't have the ability to become invasive. What are some other ways that we can help with?
Well, let's see. We've talked about cleaning our gear and working with local facilities to know what animals you can own and what animals that are invasive. Another way we could control invasive species.
I can help you out is with firewood, for example.
Right,
Again,
firewood.
things that we don't typically think about. So when you have wood from one area, say your backyard, and you have this great campsite that you love to go to in, say, Canada. So you want to take that firewood with you and you want to transport it over, but that is not good because there could be insects in that wood that you're now transporting to a completely new ecosystem, and that can have the ability to spawn an invasive species. Another thing is when you're fishing, make sure that you use live native bait. If you're using live bait, make sure it's native bait. So if it does kind of wiggle away, you know that it'll survive there and not harm anything. You can volunteer with local removal efforts. So some organizations will have a day we can go and kind of help remove non-native plants, invasive plants. They also have things like derbies. We can go and hunt lionfish or hunt pythons or other animals that are invasive, but maybe they have some other uses that you can, you could consume them as well. So I think those are probably the highlights.
Yeah, I would like to state one more thing. If you do have an animal that you don't want to keep anymore, please don't just release it. There are plenty of organizations, our local SPCAs, some of them can take those exotic animals that you normally couldn't just give away. So they can take your reptiles, your birds, your fish, even dogs and cats, like I said. So just make sure you know your local authorities to help in that instance if you didn't want to keep your animal for its entire lifespan.
Yes, don't flush your fish.
Don't flush your fish.
And if you have a species you don't want, fish or otherwise, you can often return those to the PetSmart. To the pet stores. They will take them back. And then your local SPCA, they'll take birds, reptiles. Just look in the sea. There's plenty of opportunities other than releasing them into the environment.
Now remember, invasive species are generalists. They can take over any environment that they're introduced to. That's literally what they do. They can adapt to any changing climate, and that's not good for your native species. So you want to make sure you know what animals are supposed to be where they are.
Exactly. So, did we have any questions?
Right, sorry about that. We've given you a lot of information, and we hope you absorbed some of it. But if not, go ahead and ask some questions. We'll answer them to the best of our ability. But other than that, we're going to take off, and we're going to see you guys tomorrow again at 2 o'clock for another Facebook Live, and we really hope you enjoyed this today.